call the meeting to order. We're a little after 7. We got Aaron on here on Skype, so please note attendance, Denise. And we'll move right into discussion items. 2016-17 board goals for budget development, preliminary budgeting information. This is you, Andy.
And I may have to dash to my office to get a folder that I seem to have forgotten, but what I'll just go ahead and introduce this, though, just say that we're at the beginning of the budget development for 2016 and 17 school year, and I think it's important for the board to have an opportunity to hear, at least preliminarily, what some of the priorities are that we've discussed as an administrative team, give you an opportunity to give some input related to those, and also talk about what some of those priorities that you as a board may have in your mind as we put this information together. Steve Nielsen is here this evening, and Steve is working feverishly to get preliminary information out to principals, including their allocations. And while I dash and get that folder, Steve, maybe if you could take just a second to talk about the information related to what we know, especially around the 2-year allocation and that kind of thing. I'll be right back.
Can you hear okay, Aaron?
Hi, Aaron. Can you hear me?
I can hear okay.
Okay. I'll try to speak up.
It's a little faint.
Oh, is it going through your?
Yeah, through the phone.
Oh, is it? Okay.
That should help.
Hi, Aaron. Phone's by me now.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay. So this 16-17 budget preparation year is a business manager's dream from the standpoint of the knowns, and that's great for me with being my first year in Silver Falls, because every district goes through the process a little bit differently, so that's great. What I mean by that is we're heading into the second year of the 2-year biennium, so we know we're not waiting on the state's budget like we would be next year as they go through the legislative session. In a year like that, we need to take a guess and start our process. But we know the 2-year budget of just under $7.4 billion, and it's split between it's a 49.2, 50.8 split. So we'll be heading into the second year with the higher allocation for 16-17. We also know that we had another quarterly state economic forecast last week, and it was came back fine again. It was stable, actually slightly ahead of where they projected for revenues for this biennium, which is great, which means we don't foresee getting cut at all before the end of the biennium, although we still have a ways to go in this biennium. They do see some longer range stagnation for state revenues, and that's something we definitely need to prepare for, as well as the PERS, of course, for 17, 19, and beyond. So revenue, we pretty much know. We know our enrollment's stable, if not ever so slightly growing, so we can plan on those things. We're also fortunate to have our bargaining agreement in place through next year, so we know what those costs are. A lot of times those are in limbo as well as we go to budget, so we know we have a 2% COLA for both classified and certified, as well as step increase for those that are not topped out. We know what our PERS rates are, so with that, it's just more about, we have the information. Now it's just a matter of, what are our priorities? How are we going to move forward for next year as a district? Next year, as we sit here in next February, we'll probably not know a lot of these things. So anyway, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, good. Thank you for that. I do want to draw your attention to this document, even though we'll be referring to it when we talk about mid-year goal update. There's one, possibly 2 pages on here I'd like to just give you a quick reference to as I continue with some of the comments that Steve just made. The first one, just right on the cover, and that is a graphic to show, at least since 2010, what our enrollment has looked like in this school district. And while I think statistically we can say it's relatively flat, if you take a look at really 2009, about 2009 to present through 2015, the enrollment in this district has actually increased just under 8%. And so even over the course of that period, it looks like it is fairly flat. We've gone from about 3,700 or so to current about 3,800 students in this district. I bring that to your attention And some of you remember this well, if you've been in the district since you've been on the board for a few years, is that we went through some pretty tough times in 2010, 11, and 12 related to reductions and scale backs and so forth. We've been able to add a number of things back, including a number of positions. And so with that said, you'll be hearing me in just a minute talk about what some of the other staffing priorities are that I'm hoping that we can administer with the budget. And again, all of this has to be vetted through the budget committee, so this is entirely preliminary at this point.
Andy, do you know where the growth's coming from? Is it coming in from in town or across the board?
I think we've seen the largest growth at the high school. So that doesn't really give a huge indication, but I can tell you that the number of student transfers into the district, especially over the last 2 or 3 years, at the high school level has increased to a higher proportion
So
of what we've seen.
it's due to transfers, not...
We haven't been able to drill down specifically what it looks like for in district, with the exception of Victor Point attendance area, which has increased over the last few years. It's maintaining that strong 222, 224 students. Otherwise, the other areas of the district have peaks and valleys. Perfect example is Silver Crest School, which was about 138, 140 students last year. It's up to 150 some odd this year. It was as high as 165 just a few years ago and then dropped down again. Some of that has to do with the attendance area itself. Some of it has to do with transfers, admittedly, but the transfers are entirely controlled by the principal of that building for the most part to be able to keep that in check. So I don't have a good answer for that one.
Just traditionally, 2001, 2002 timeframe was really, I think, when we saw our peak.
Mm-hmm.
Now it looks like we're surpassing that, so.
I think so. So, with all of this in mind, one of the goals, and you've heard this one from me in the past, and I think it's still a valid goal and one that actually offers some assurance, is to be able to maintain the current staffing levels that we have in the district. Again, that's a little hit and miss depending upon the priorities of the schools and what it is that they want to serve, but the appropriation that we're putting together, we believe will be sufficient to maintain current staffing across the board. I placed a copy of this in front of you as well. Another priority that we're in the second year of our strategic plan. I think it's important that we use this, and the budget committee uses this as a document. It's a lot of information here, admittedly, but when we talk about student achievement, and especially attention to the 3 goals that you're going to hear Linda and I discuss a little bit tonight, yeah, it's fair to ask yourself the questions. How do your budget priority decisions affect the priorities or the goals that you've identified for the next 5 years in this district that you've put in your strategic visioning document? And the third one, and I know Todd has commented on this a couple times in the past as well, and that's related to PERS. While we still don't have a full defined impact of PERS, we know it's going to be something, and it could be significant. We don't know if the legislature is going to do anything about that in the January session of 2017. We don't know the full impact just yet, but depending upon who you speak with, the impact could be significant, it could be mild, but nobody's talking about less than mild. So I think it's going to be important that you as a board do everything you can, and the budget committee to recommend to you that you do everything you can to begin cushioning that impact for the 2017-19 biennium. So those are the 3 areas that again I'm here to identify, and I want to talk about one more though. So that's current staff, utilizing your district visioning document, and having some attempt at addressing the PERS impact. But another one that really fits within current staffing plus some is specific to the administrative staffing level in this district. I believe it's time for you as a board, or the budget committee, to give serious consideration to increasing the administrative staffing level. And I'm going to come at you with plenty of information during the budget committee development or budget development process as we move ahead. But the down and dirty of it is, if you take a look back at 2009 to 2015, being able to add back some of those programs and positions that you've cut, with the most significant cut being classified employees over the first 2 or 3 years of that time period, you've actually added back 8% of licensed staff members, so 8% larger staff member number now as compared to then. You've added back 16% classified staff members to your district, many of those in special education as a matter of need, but across the board as well from clerical support. And you've added 0 to administrative staff. And the other piece that has drawn my attention, I think fairly significantly, I think this is valid, is that we added full day kindergarten last year. And when you talk about the equivalent a number of students for full-day kindergarten, across the district, it's 125 students. If we had 125 students move into this district and set up a new school, we'd be putting a portion of an administrator in that school, and we've done nothing to address that. You compound that with a number of mandates, a number of things specific to expectations for administration around teacher evaluation and observations, which is really quite significant as compared to a few years. I believe I'm in a good position to share with you some recommendations for administrative input. Don't know exactly what that will be. We estimate that to be 1 to a portion of, let's say, 1.1, possibly 1.2 increase to take care of some building tasks related to full-day K, as well as some district-specific tasks to help us out. I think there's a need. So that'll bring us all back in alignment again. And Tim and Wally and Tom, you may remember this as well, but we did cut a half-time administrator in the district about 5 years ago and have not replaced that position. So that compounded with the other needs, I think, are an interesting position for us to be able to propose that. So more detail to come, but those are the areas that I'd like to at least throw at you and see if any or all of you have some insight about possible priorities for you as a board as we move into the budget development.
Discussion, any thoughts?
When does this, when does the full PERS affect, or the recent lawsuit that was overturned by the Supreme Court? When does that comes into 17, 19, not through this current budget process? Okay,
Correct.
okay.
Yes,
And
sir.
that's when we're really gonna have to really,
That decision, along with investment returns that didn't hit the 7.75 guaranteed PERS
Right.
rate of return, the rates that the PERS board will come out with in their September 2016 board meeting will be the rates for 17-19.
Oh,
And they
okay.
will, well, right now, the actuary company, they're working on the valuation for the year 2015.
right?
So the investment returns from calendar year 2014 and 2015 will be incorporated along with the Supreme Court decision with the 17-19 rates.
Right, so
So
when I look at this next budget that we're gonna do for next year,
for 16-17.
I don't wanna tie our hands to
No.
potential big problems that might be coming up
Exactly.
from 17, 19.
And that's what Andy was referring to.
Yeah, that's
in his
where I'm, so I'm
priorities,
trying to
is
get
that
my,
We're trying to
Yeah.
hedge to allow some sort of a smoothing
yeah.
over the long term, you know, and obviously, a higher than expected increase in our ending fund balance from 14-15 certainly helps start that, but we hopefully will be able to come away with some more from this year, 15-16, and plan for more in the 16-17 cycle to help mitigate or offset the rate increase for 17-18 and 18-19 and beyond.
Okay, I just had to ask the question
Yeah.
again to hear.
Yeah,
just to kinda-
absolutely.
That's kind of.
So we'll know the rates in
In
September.
September, yep,
Or
well
what the rates
before
are
we
gonna
start
be
our
for the next
budgeting
plan.
for, yeah.
That'll help.
Yeah, it will help a lot.
Yeah.
I guess, Andy, in reference to your question though, I think one priority for me is to maintain staffing. We don't want to grow our classroom sizes. I think you addressed that. Now, I've been concerned about administrative staffing for a while. I've been hearing more and more recently, within the last couple of years anyway, about classroom teachers not feeling like they're getting their full support because
Mhm.
the administration's so fragmented right now. So I think there does need to be some more support to help those teachers.
I agree, there's been so many things added, you know, with the evaluations and even the whole teacher cadre piece and managing all that, and I think it's probably time.
Do we have some anecdotal evidence? Like, is there any additional stress we see on staff? Is there increase in sick days to show that we do need to bring on additional staff? Andy, this time?
We, I don't know that we have anything as like that. I mean, something like increase in number of sick days would be kind of more of a metric, wouldn't it, more data driven. I don't know that we necessarily have that, but we do have the implementation of Senate Bill 290, which was implemented just a couple of years ago, and it requires a pretty significant increase in the accountability of teachers in the classroom as determined by the administrator. So increase in the number of observations that they have to make, increase in the recording of the information that they have to make in order to maintain that. And admittedly, we struggle with that. So that's one piece that I would draw your attention to, Ron. We can surely collect some of these as well. The other pieces I think that are notable are just the sheer numbers. I mean, we have higher expectations simply because we have an 8% increase in enrollment across this district, and we haven't had any administrative increase in staffing to address those. And with kids come things that have to be dealt with. The third one that comes to mind, at least at this point, we can come up with others, are related to the increased complexity of behavioral needs of our students. It's not just the special education department, which, while we're remaining fairly flat in number of special education kids, the complexity of our kids have really become quite sophisticated and required administrative and teacher response that's unprecedented. Behavioral plans, behavioral classrooms. Just had some recent legislation that I shared with the board that you had for policy adjustments that says we can no longer suspend kids of a certain age. Well, we haven't done that a lot in the past. It's one less tool that we have available to us, which requires additional staffing at the building level in order to accommodate some of these more complex needs. So those are a few that just come to mind as I think about your question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with the priorities you laid out too. You know, keep current staffing the way it is, and the other ones.
Hey guys, if you could move the photo to the other side, I'd appreciate it. It'd be,
Oh, sorry, Aaron.
a little better. Thanks, guys.
I'd be also, I don't know if it needs to be a priority right now based on everything else going on, but I would like to hear, particularly from the high school, their ideas about the vocational ed opportunities might be out there. Maybe we can do some things, not even, won't take a lot of funding, but we heard a presentation a few months ago. I think they had some important points that we ought to try, at least try to address.
At the high school level, Wally,
Particularly at the high school
talking about it?
level.
Okay,
I don't know if
so
we can really implement some of the things they talked about at the middle school level, but I think there may be some opportunities at the high school level.
And you'd like just some additional information on that, or you'd like to see possibly some adjustments in the budget made to increase?
At least have Mark think about it as he puts his budget together and see if there's some opportunities.
So, well, if I'm hearing you right, too, kind of like a current assessment of what we're doing for vocational education based, and then kind of put that in light of what we heard from some of the presentations to see if we can do a little bit more.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I'd like to see that.
I would even bring it down to the junior high level if it's possible. I mean, I kind of agree with Wally that there's probably not a lot that can be done there, but I know do we already still have the grant?
We don't have the grant,
But it's been-
Nancy's sustaining
some of the
that
kids are-
Mark Twain budget.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it doesn't hurt to just see it, investigate that a little bit to see if it can be expanded a little bit down. Because I know that's one thing in the presentation down to the junior high level, and I think that could help a lot of kids, even if it was expanded a little bit beyond what it is now. And it might be easier with the junior high, or with, right there too.
Yeah.
Sure.
Is there any push from state or federal about, CTE, additional CTE funding coming down the pipeline? I went to that roundtable that Kurt Schrader had in Salem the other day, and everybody was talking about it. And I don't know, does that mean any other programs that might be talked about, or do you hear of anything, or is it all just talk?
I'm not certain about anything at the federal level,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
there are some dollars at the state level that have been appropriated for competitive grant purposes. Something called Project Lead the Way, which we've qualified a couple of years in the past. In fact, under Danny's leadership when she was principal at Mark Twain, and other career technical education dollars that were just released, not to Silver Falls District, because frankly, I think people are trying to meet what it is that we're
Yes.
doing in our
Yeah.
district, and I'm not certain that we would qualify for those dollars. But Linda, you may have some other thoughts on that.
So the Perkins dollars, which are federal dollars, Teresa's the one that really manages those as those come in. And so Mark does actually have a plan that looks specifically at reorganizing they have the licensure that current staff hold that are teaching perhaps in courses that are outside CTE, but they hold CTE licensure. So his plan, and he doesn't have his allocation yet, but his plan is to shift as much of his CTE licensed teachers into CTE on a full-time basis, and then backfill their math classes and their study halls
Cool.
with other teachers who are licensed. So I know,
Okay.
when I visited with him last week, that is the number one priority for him, and I think he will be able to make that happen at a minimum. They also are working on an additional allocation of dollars that are potentially coming into the building. Majority of that is not for direct services to kids, but it's additional training for teachers in CTE and or how to integrate CTE principles, technical principles into a general ed math class or other courses.
That's was gonna be my next question.
Good.
Can we get,
Right.
can we get math and science credits for
Right.
some of these CTE
Yeah.
classes?
So they're working on it.
Good.
That would be awesome.
I don't know
It's
enough
not a
about-
short-term process, but it's something that is definitely on Mark's radar.
Good.
The high school did just receive, we got word a month and a half ago, some dollars that I think came through due to the legislative session. I believe it's state money, CTE.
They were right, non-competitive
It's
CTE.
$50,000 or $60,000 for the high school that's to be used this year, or things like that. He's just meeting actually this Thursday with those folks to make sure that they have their spending plan for the rest of this year. I don't know if that money repeats itself in the second year of the biennium or not, but that was the non-competitive arm of that came out of the legislative session, so.
Good.
And you kind of addressed this, Andy, as well, but we need to make sure we have a healthy carryover. I think we typically target about 10% during good times. I think it needs to be higher based on this PERS issue.
That's a good point.
I don't know what the number is, but
Well, yeah, that, if we're gonna have some economic flatlining in the next few years or whatever, then maybe, maybe we have to table or shelve some of these ideas for a while, once we have an idea.
Okay. The fund balance, and again, we'll go into this more detail with the budget committee and you folks, but fund balance is higher than what we'd anticipated this year, so that's very helpful. I think it's 11.9% is where it landed on the audited amount. So that's at essentially where we were pre-recession,
Good.
Which is good.
Very good.
Okay, well, this gives us some very good information
Okay.
to put together as we put some of the budget development documents together.
Anything else before we leave this one? Okay. Mid-year review, district goals and strategic visioning plan goals.
You want to come up with it?
Can you hear okay still, Aaron? Okay.
I'm going to turn this over to Linda in just a moment, but I did throw some other documents in there that I thought would be of interest to you in this packet. We're going to address actually two sets of goals, one of them being specific to your strategic visioning goals. And if you take a look in your document, it's on page 7 and 8, the strategic goals in there. And I'll read them out loud. I'm not sure if Aaron has this document in front of him, but 100% of K-12 students will be on track to graduate. Every student will attend 95% or more school days, and 100% of teachers will be proficient or distinguished in the practice of student engagement. And it took us quite a while, as you recall, to come up with those 3 goals, and I think they still are spot on and fit a very specific purpose for our school district. So with that said, I'll draw your attention back to the enrollment sheet that is on the cover page. The second sheet is a document that I use monthly when I track student enrollment of all schools in the district. And you can see on the first of every month, we take a look at where we sit at each school. So it gives us a bit of a heads up especially if we see trends or patterns related to enrollment changes. And the bottom line, the totals at the bottom is the total of student enrollment for the school district. We also track more higher profile subgroups on the bottom, from special education, free and reduced lunches, et cetera. And again, specifically for our reference to look at year to year and within each year, month to month. The third page is other educational opportunities, again, related to where we are as a school district for students and their choices for educational choices anyway. For the most part, the blue line, which is the percentage of homeschool students, has actually risen about a percentage and a half over the last 2 or 2.5 years or so, which is an interesting increase. I'm not quite certain why, because we've hovered around 2.5 to 3.5% of homeschool students in this community for many years. So we're keeping a close eye on that. I really don't have any assessment about why that could be occurring, and it very possibly could drop back down to 3% next year. We just don't know. The online schools, the red line, I thought was rather interesting. You know, a lot of people talk about it. You see advertisements on television and newspapers and so forth, but we're hovering just a little over 1% of the students using online charter schools or virtual options within our school district. The next one you've seen before. I guess I'm very proud of it. Our 4-year graduation rate, which is quite compelling and impressive. And then I'm at this point going to ask Linda to chime in a little bit, because we're beginning to talk about the goals, most specifically 100% of K-12 students will be on track to graduate. So Linda, you want to run it from there?
So one of the indicators, this actually came out of the work that was originally done with the Achievement Compact, when that was a requirement by the state, and one of their indicators was completion of 6 credits by the end of your freshman year. So students who are passing 6 out of their 7 courses. Traditionally, we have done very well at that. We typically are well above the state average, and we're seeing that trend continue. So in 13-14, 92% of our freshman class had completed 6 high school credits or more successfully. We increased that to 93% in the previous school year, and at the end of first semester we are at 88%. That gives us every indication that we will continue to be on track. Those numbers always increase from first semester to second semester. Kids that have incompletes that are currently hanging out there that will finish and earn credit that they didn't have earned by January 25th at the end of the semester, but we'll go ahead and pick those credits back up as they complete those outstanding requirements. So I have every reason to believe that we will be, again, increasing the number of freshmen and that percentage point of those kids that are considered on track. So that indicator actually was not one that we made up on our own. We did elect to continue including that in our visioning plan, but that data point actually came out of research that originally was brought to our attention through the requirement of the Achievement Compact. So that's why that indicator exists. A more traditional indicator would be what we use with our K-8 students, and that's what we use the STAR assessment data for. So you'll see just some quick data points. Currently, our reading scores, and again, this is a district combined average, so 63% of all of our students in K-8 are on track based upon what is a grade level benchmark that is set within the STAR system. That average is a little bit of a measurement. Our students in grades 3, 4, and 5 are making consistent gains and are scoring higher. They're outscoring their 6th, 7th, and 8th grade counterparts. So the average of that lands us at 63%. That has been statistically true for about the last 3 years. Sometimes the 5th grade scores fall in line more with the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade scores, but last year and this year the 5th graders have made tremendous progress, more in line with what we've seen typically out of 3rd and 4th graders. So we've had lots of conversations over time about why that is. Attitude towards having to sit down and take the test is always somewhat of an indicator. Teachers have consistently been able to say that they have classroom assessments that demonstrates that students are performing commensurate with the grade level expectations. It is what it is. We're not sure we're going to ever completely combat that at the middle school level, but those results are pretty typical for us over time. You will see that our math scores have outperformed our reading scores. That's a bit of a shift in the last 3 years. I would say from 2010 to 2013, our reading scores were consistently outscoring our math scores. We started to see a little bit of that shift. I'm not sure we've ever really explained that very well. It is resultant more of an increase in our math scores than a decrease of our reading scores. So it's not anything that's been terribly concerning to us. We're happy that our math scores have increased to be more commensurate with our reading scores. So that looks pretty good. The next page then moves to attendance. So an additional strategic goal is every student will attend 95% or more school days. This indicator is a little bit different in that when we do our final analysis of whether we've actually met the goal as listed in the strategic visioning document, the numbers will be different than what we have for you here. Because what we have for you here is an actual average of district attendance. So what is the average attendance rate of our students? Versus what we will do in our year-end analysis will be a very explicit analysis of how many of our students were here, 95% or more. That's a different number than the average attendance rate of our students. So do you see the difference? So what we're giving you now on the top of the final page here is the average data, which is what we have collected statistically over time for years and years and years. And so you'll see a nice increase, just a little bit of a dip, less than 1/10 of a point in 14-15. But again, by February 2016, we're at a really nice 94 and almost 0.5% rate. What our goal is to maintain the 94% district average, but the strategic indicator is also that 75% of our student population will be present 95% of the time. So that's actually a much more stringent indicator. So it's a lot of numbers and the calculations are different, and I want to lay that out to you because if you look at the goal document, it says that our goal is 75%, but yet the numbers we've got here say we're at, approaching 95%. They really are different indicators. We don't have this indicator over time yet. We will. This kind of data we have not collected in years past, but the administrative team was adamant that we felt it was important that every kid be here 95% of the time or more. And again, just to frame that for you, that gives kids 9 absences. So if you're absent 1 day a month, you can still hit that 95% target. So completely reasonable expectation. And so we believe that that is a better measure of absenteeism for kids and whether they're really present in school learning. So that's a little bit of that difference. I just wanted to explain that to you.
Just to chime in, I think you've all remembered that some of the principal reports that you've received at your monthly meetings. In fact, I recall from Jamie McCarty, the Silver Crest and Victor Point report, while again it was specific to average, but it was average around 96, 97+%, and a lot of incentivizing and promotion and positive communication related to attendance is going on in the school district. And I think we're going to see these numbers continue to rise. And end of the year will be pretty tight.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited to share those numbers because I think that the efforts that building administrators have put in, I think those will bear witness in some increased attendance for more kids being present more often, and that's what we want. So, and then finally, the final strategic goal, 100% of teachers will be proficient or distinguished in the district standard for student engagement. So remember that standard is measured on the Danielson framework. That's the research-based rubric that we adopted for teacher evaluation. So administrators collect evidence, they weigh that evidence against the rubric, and the language of the rubric help us determine whether the evidence that the teacher is displaying in the classroom falls at a basic level, a proficient level, or distinguished level. So proficient is the goal, distinguished is an exemplary place to be. That requires a very high level of technical expertise in the classroom as far as engaging students in learning. But our numbers look good. We've seen some growth. So at the end of the 14-15 school year, 81% of our teachers on their summative evaluations had demonstrated evidence to be scored as either proficient or distinguished. And we just have done our mid-year, so these are not final evaluations. These are still collaborative conversations that we're having with teachers, but we're already at 81.6%. Those are rough numbers based upon those conversations and those mid-year documents that have been completed and filed. Our target for the 15-16 school year is to hit 85%, so I would love to see us hit that. That's the indicator that we put in for the 15-16 school year. And
85% of what?
85% of all of our licensed teachers will be scored as proficient or distinguished.
Okay.
So as we wrote the plan, we had 5 years, and so we're building up to that 100% target. So our target for the end of this year was 85%. And then I believe, then we moved to 90%, 95%, and 100%.
Okay. I've done some evaluation with a similar completely different
Sure.
workforce and very similar. And typically what you shoot for, what I was shooting for was 80% would be in the middle. You'd have 15% on top, and 5 at the bottom.
I'd like to have about 1 on the bottom,
Well,
half on the bottom.
you have a distribution though, and that using that type of model, you can kind of ratchet things up a little bit too,
Mhm, mhm.
to make them more strict.
Yeah, yeah. We've been really, really pleased with the specificity that Danielson has given us. Administrators are not going in and having to make blind judgments or opinion-based, decisions about, oh, well, I think you're doing well. The rubric is really, really well done. And so collecting evidence in a classroom observation and then supporting that, many teachers have used the evidence that their teacher cadre member has provided for them as well, and they're providing that to the administrator saying, hey, my peer was in my classroom and this is the evidence that they collected and I want you to use that towards my evaluation. So it's been a rich process, but again, very time consuming and a pretty distinct shift in practice for our administrative team. So I would say that's definitely
It's very
added-
time-consuming
Yeah,
for everybody.
definitely added to the stress level. Yeah.
So are the charter school kids and teachers included in
The
this?
charter school, no, they are not, because they don't fall under our collective bargaining agreement, and there is some new legislation that requires charter schools to move forward with educator effectiveness, so teacher evaluation using a rubric. If the charter schools came to us for support in that, obviously I would recommend that they use Danielson so that they could participate in our trainings, but they don't have to. They have the right to elect to use their own
They have their own
scoring.
governing body.
No, I
Yeah.
understand that.
Yeah.
I guess what I also was gonna get at is, are the charter schools kids' attendance in this as well?
No.
They're not either, so they're all in their
Mhm.
homeschool as well?
Yeah, we don't track,
Okay.
yeah.
How are the teachers responding to all the new evaluations and this whole thing with the,
You know,
proficiency and stuff?
increasing the amount of feedback is a double-edged sword in that it exposes amazing things that are happening in classrooms and allows us to really celebrate more specifically. So instead of just saying, hey, good job, now we're able to say, in the course of your lesson, you engaged your students in 9 different activities in 25 minutes. And, we're able to really provide evidence-based statements, which are really powerful. But it also is more exposing
Yeah,
because
of course.
teachers now are getting just data laid in front of them. And sometimes that data says, you called on the same 4 students for 20 minutes and didn't call on, the other 24 students sitting in your classroom. So, it fosters all sorts of different conversations, and some people are ready for that, and some people are
some
not as
probably
ready
do.
for that.
Yeah.
There needs to be a cultural adjustment.
Absolutely.
Because the teachers need to be understanding that this isn't necessarily meant to beat them over the head. But
No.
It's to make them better, and it
Yeah.
should be, ideally be received as a gift
Right.
to help them be better.
And that has been the big issue, this culture of continuous improvement. That evaluation is not about a gotcha. Evaluation is about, let's identify your areas of strength, let's pinpoint something that we know you can get better at, and then we're going to support you in doing that. So,
And that'll take a
Absolutely.
few years, especially with the veteran teachers.
absolutely.
It'll
But
take-
for the most part, I think the combination of having the opportunity to have some peers, that's obviously less threatening. And not everybody wants a peer in their classroom.
Yeah.
But for some teachers, they're able to say, look, you're just there watching. You're just like me. You teach in the room next door. You teach in the room down the hall. So you know what you're looking for. And,
Yeah.
when you give me advice, it's really helpful.
Mhm.
So I think that has been a pretty powerful model for us
Yeah,
as well.
okay.
The only other 2 things that come to mind is I appreciate you saying that it's a cultural shift, because there is a cultural shift to that. We're finding that our younger teachers are really hungry for this information, especially millennial teachers. But we're actually finding that our veteran teachers are really feeling fairly rewarded that this is something that they've been hungry for in the past, and now they're getting it. It's an affirmation of what it is that they do. The other piece, I think, the second piece that I want to comment on is around the cultural shift, is creating the awareness, especially in our veteran staff, that every professional can improve. There's not a single teacher within our school district that is finished improving or growing professionally yet. I remember years ago, and we still use it on occasion, phrases like master, teacher, and so forth, and we use the phrase now distinguished, but we use the phrase distinguished in really a very limited and defined way that is not something that, one of the phrases is, we don't live in distinguished.
We visit.
We visit distinguished. And I think that's really is telling for how we need to shift as a culture, that teachers need to continue to grow, whether they're 15 years in or 35 years in.
Good.
Questions? Good stuff. I'm pleased with the results.
Yeah, that is,
Should be too, yeah.
that is really good. It's encouraging. Bring Aaron back.
Aaron's being delivered.
Tim, the last sheet I'll refer to is, okay, just a reminder, as a mid-year reminder of your goals that you approved earlier this year. And really, goal number one, you're essentially getting an update to that right now with your strategic visioning document and the information that Linda and I just shared. And then number two, you receive monthly updates on the transition efforts towards conversion of the Schlater campus. So we continue to make gains on that. We'll continue to give monthly updates.
Good deal.
Andy, do you want to clarify? It appears, and now correct me if I'm wrong, all of the charter schools are included in all of your enrollment data,
That's correct.
but not in any of the performance or attendance data.
They're definitely not the performance data. I'd have to check with Sandy about the attendance data. I'm not certain.
Well, according to page 2, they're in the, there they are in the enrollment numbers.
They're in the enrollment numbers for certain. Yeah.
Any other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, excuse me, joint Silverton City Council, Silver Falls School Board meeting. We've talked about this off and on. I guess we haven't too much as a board. Aaron just asked me about it a couple at the last meeting. But the city manager and mayor kind of approached us wondering if we were interested in doing another joint meeting, you know, in the near future. We try to do these a couple times a year, just, you know, for common interests and things like that. And so Andy and I are supposed to meet with the city manager and mayor, I think it's this week, and try to come up with some topics for this. First off, though, we were wondering about the date. The two dates we kind of came up with is March 28th, which I think is our regular work session,
That's correct.
and April 18th, which would be the city council's work session, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Is that a
So-
Monday?
They're both Mondays. City council had a few conflicts, I know, and so really, that's the first question is, what do you guys prefer? The 18th of March or moving it into, or excuse me, 28th of March or moving it into April?
April 18th would mean an extra meeting for us unless we counted that as our regular April work session.
Unless we have
So-
other things we need to talk about, and need the meeting. I don't know. What do you perceive, Andy, as far as needing the March and April meeting?
We don't have any set topics yet, other than maybe discussing things that might come up related to budget development. And other than that, I don't have any other topics
So-
set in my mind right now.
The March 28th meeting, depending on where we're at with the hiring of Joel's
Oh,
replacement,
that's
it's
true.
possible you may need to approve the hire.
You may have to take action on that.
We could possibly, if we wanted to do it on March 28th and not add a meeting to our schedules, we could, you know, start the meeting with the city council like at 6 and have that go for an hour and a half or whatever it would take, and then we could do a short meeting
Yeah.
with just us. We could kind of combine them into one evening if we started an hour earlier. I would prefer that rather than add another meeting, because we have budget meetings coming up and some things like that, so.
Yeah, I agree with that too. They're giving us the option to, sorry, Tim. I agree with you though, Tim. I think if they're giving us the option to do it, and we can put it on one of our work sessions, I say why not?
Okay. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody? So we'll confirm it with the city council, but maybe plan on starting at 6 on our March 28th meeting.
Unless we don't have any business to talk about, then
Yeah.
I assume we will.
Yeah, we probably will. And then what about topics? Does anybody have any ideas that Andy and I could take for topics?
Well, the topics that have been most common in the past would be related to facilities. I mean, clearly we're making progress on Eugene Field, but that may be a topic at least to have a conversation about. I don't know whether the city would have a ton of interest in anything related to that property or not, but it would surely be, I think we'd be missing an opportunity if you didn't at least have that conversation again. You did last time, and it
Yeah.
generated some conversation.
Would it be a good time to talk a little bit about kind of, now that we have our SRO in place, to kind of maybe get an update from the city side and even with us to kind of hear some input on that and see how things are going? Can I keep it in front of the public?
That'd be nice.
Great.
Yeah.
That'd be a good idea. Yeah, thanks, Aaron.
So we can collect some data, maybe Andy can work on that and
Yeah.
get some information for that, okay?
What was his exact start date again? I apologize, my date slips my mind.
January 4th.
January, okay. I thought it was January. Thanks.
Good. Any other ideas? Okay, that's a couple things, and we can,
Yeah, I will throw one other out there, and this actually would be a report later this spring, but that's related to facility use in this district, especially facility use at Silverton High School. It's literally off the charts, and I think it'd be just a very interesting conversation to have with the city about what that looks like, and while it's not all city residents using the high school, of course, I think it would be very helpful for city council to know what kind of activity is occurring.
Also a precursor with the field kind of
Sure.
as well.
That's right.
Very good.
That's right.
that's a really good idea, because probably a lot of them aren't aware of the amount that our facilities get used.
Some are and some aren't, to be good for them all to hear it.
Yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to hear from the city perspective that the city is doing that might be helpful as you manage the school district?
If I could real quick before I forget, when Tim was just mentioning with the city there, as I understand it, we have some agreements with the city using our facilities, the school facilities for sports and whatnot. I assume when Eugene Field's decommissioned, that'll end, or will they still be using the gym there, or?
Yeah, I think the gym is actually used very little by the community. It's used by YMCA on occasion and maybe Silverton Youth Basketball, but it's of all of our gyms is used minimally. And the green space there is, what, 3/4 of an acre, and that gets used by some, small T-ball teams every once in a while, things like that, but it's.
The topic had been brought up, I went out to Mark Twain a while ago, and they were talking about how they had to, if I remember right, they had to maintain the locker rooms there because the city used them and that was part of it. And,
No, I don't.
or maybe it was the restroom, I could be wrong, either way, but they had talked about that because that was part of the usage agreement.
Yeah, the city agreement with the school district is really specific to, we have a couple of agreements. One of them is specific to a grant that the city gives us every year, I believe it's $20,000, to help us offset care of the green space within the school district. The city also helped us purchase, I think they provided half the cost for a mower about 6 or 7 years ago, and I think the city would be interested in doing that again, at least it's my belief, when the mower needed to be replaced. The city also provides access to unmetered water. I shouldn't say unmetered, but I think it's metered, but it's not, we're not charged for it because it's all gravity feed directly off the Abaquaw for Mark Twain, for the Schlater campus. I think those are the only two facilities, and that's another thing that they do for the school district in exchange for the school district providing the acres that we do for essentially the Parks and Recreation Department in the city of Silverton, which is quite a good deal for the city. But there's no other detail, Todd, that I'm aware of, anything related to restroom use or
Okay, so
access to buildings or anything like that. They get access to them as anyone else would in the community.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Okay,
great, thanks.
okay, good. Any other discussion items?
Well, just one quick one, just going back to this, Andy, showing the other educational opportunities. If this trend continues, we probably ought to survey some of these people and see why they're making these choices, so at least we know if it's something the school district isn't doing, or some perception, or some what's going on here, what's in their thinking.
So that's a very good point.
Can we get a state average? or something, you know, as to
Yeah,
other districts or, you know, similar districts, what they're seeing?
Yes, we can definitely do that. I know the Salem Kaisers and the Statons of the world are higher. They're in the 7 to 8% range for homeschool. We've actually remained relatively low for
Right.
many years on homeschooling. So we'll look into that a little bit more too, Tom, and get that.
Right.
I think that'd be a
Yeah.
good comparison. It's hard to
remember
compare
that,
statewide because when you talk about the
Yeah.
more populated counties as compared to the Harney counties and, you know,
Yeah,
some of
the
the less
distance.
populated counties, it's a
Yes.
little more difficult to
Yeah,
compare
I
apples to
remember,
apples.
yeah, I remember seeing data like, that confirmed just what you said, that I remember seeing it, go, wow, we're low, we must be doing something right. So even though we're seeing an uptick, I think we're still,
Yeah, I would agree,
but,
Tom. I
agree.
but still, when you start seeing it going up, you wanna kinda
You
watch.
just
it.
kind of wonder, and it may be nothing, maybe just parental choice, that's what they want to do, which is great.
Right,
But it may also be some type of perception they see negatively on the school district.
yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Could just be a perception thing.
Yeah, good points. All of those are very good points. We'll get that more additional data too.
Okay, we will take a short 5-minute break and then we will move into executive session to look at 3 different topics. I'll read them when we get there.